In the Bible, we see the patriarchs repeating the same mistake that Sarah and Abraham made, having children with their wives' handmaidens. Jacob, the third patriarch, is no exception. He had children with both Leah's handmaiden, Zilpah, and Rachel's handmaiden, Bilhah. Despite Leah being quite productive herself, Jacob still slept with Zilpah, and she bore him several children. Zilpah's story begins when she was a handmaid to Laban. Jacob, fleeing from his brother Esau, who wanted to kill him for stealing their father's blessing, sought refuge in Laban's home. Jacob fell in love with Laban's daughter Rachel and was duped by Laban into working 7 years for her, only to be given Leah, the less desirable sister, instead. Jacob worked another 7 years for Rachel, but he married her before that period was over. Laban gave Zilpah to Leah as recorded in Genesis 29, indicating that it was common for parents to pass their slaves down to their children. The Bible doesn't provide much detail about Zilpah's personality or her life. From Hagar's experience, we know that mistresses could be harsh towards their slaves. Sarah drove Hagar away with her cruelty, causing her to flee into the desert, though she returned after God spoke to her. Leah, on the other hand, doesn't appear to be violent or cruel in the scriptures, though she was jealous of Jacob's preference for Rachel. Nevertheless, it's likely that Zilpah didn't enjoy being Leah's handmaiden. Slavery, though different in ancient Israel compared to modern times, was never considered an honorable position. When Leah could no longer bear children, she turned to Zilpah. She gave Zilpah to Jacob as his wife, and Zilpah bore him more children. In the Bible, Zilpah is described as a wife of Jacob, Genesis 30 verse 9. It's not explicitly stated whether Jacob considered her on the same level as his wives Rachel and Leah, but the term concubine is not used, suggesting she held a higher position than the concubines of Solomon, for instance. The reason why Zilpah became a wife to Jacob can be traced back to the rivalry between Leah and Rachel. Leah had 6 sons while Rachel was barren. Rachel, desperate to have children, gave her handmaiden Bilhah to Jacob as a wife. Because Bilhah was Rachel's servant, any children she had would be seen as belonging to Rachel. When Bilhah bore 2 sons, Leah felt threatened and gave her handmaiden Zilpah to Jacob, hoping to increase her tally of children, although she was already leading 6-2. The situation reveals a sad reality of the time. Firstly, Rachel and Leah saw their handmaidens as mere extensions of themselves, not as individuals in their own right. The handmaiden's children were seen as their own, similar to how Sarah gave her handmaiden Hagar to Abraham to bear children. Secondly, it was a numbers game. The worth of a woman was often tied to the number of male offspring she could produce. Zilpah and Bilhah were undoubtedly used in this situation. Even though Jacob accepted their children as his own, the women likely suffered emotional distress. This could explain why their sons grew up to harbor deep resentment towards Joseph, one of Rachel's 2 sons. Zilpah, as mentioned in the scriptures, had 2 sons, Gad and Asher. These names are significant as they were given to 2 tribes of Israel. The tribe of Gad was known for its fierce retaliation to attacks, as seen in Genesis 49. The tribe was also quite religious, dedicating an altar to God in the book of Joshua. Gad was one of the 10 tribes that were part of the northern kingdom, which was exiled into Assyria in 722 BC. Zilpah's second son, Asher, was prophesied by Jacob to have abundant food and resources, Genesis 49. While not much is mentioned about them in the scriptures, they were also part of the northern kingdom. Both of Zilpah's sons were blessed with rich lands, and their tribes were generally faithful to God. Zilpah, despite the circumstances, would have been proud that her sons became the founders of prosperous tribes. Zilpah's story, like many other women in the Bible, is quite complex. Women in ancient times, particularly slave women, often had little control over their lives. However, the Bible stands out from other ancient texts by acknowledging the lives of enslaved people, especially women. Zilpah's story is a testament to this. Despite being a slave, she gave birth to 2 sons who led successful and faithful tribes. Her story teaches us about resilience and faith in the face of adversity. Firstly, competition can provoke individuals to exploit others. Throughout their marriage, Leah and Rachel developed a deep-seated animosity towards each other. The cause? Their society's belief that their worth was based on their ability to bear children, and Jacob's favoritism. In order to win Jacob's affection, they resorted to having children through their maidservants. Regrettably, Zilpah and Bilhah became victims of Leah and Rachel's envy and were entangled in this situation. Similarly, we might allow competition to overpower us, leading us to make our employees or friends feel exploited. When we attempt to play the role of God, we end up hurting many people. Secondly, Jacob accepted her as his wife. Interestingly, Zilpah and Bilhah were regarded as more than just concubines. Although Jacob probably didn't consider them equal to Leah and Rachel, he acknowledged their children as his own. This could be seen as a redeeming quality amidst Jacob's shortcomings. Lastly, Zilpah's sons led prosperous tribes. It's common to think of parents who didn't achieve their life goals. Maybe they grew up in poverty or worked in jobs they didn't enjoy, all in the hope that their offspring could live a better life. It's plausible to think that Zilpah felt immense pride when her sons received a generous blessing from Jacob on his deathbed. Even though her life might not have been what she had envisioned, her sons and their progeny had promising futures. God has a knack for redeeming generations and influencing our children's lives.